Hey everyone, my name's Allison Stieger. I'm a professional mythologist, and I just had the most incredible conversation with Kim. We talked about so many things. We had the great privilege to hopefully come up with some great tips for ways to just live your human life a little bit more effectively. And I hope it helps. And I just had the best time talking with Kim. I feel like we're new best friends, and it was the best. So thank you for hanging out with us for a little while, and I hope you enjoy it.
Welcome to the show. I'm so happy you're here. You're going to be so happy you're here. I am Kim Sorrelle. I'm a writer, I'm a speaker. I get to do a lot of fun things in life, but my favorite thing to do is meet people. And I get to meet incredible people. And today, I already feel this kindred spirit, this deep connection with my guest, Allison. And we've not talked a lot, but what we have talked about, I don't know, there's synergies, there's just good stuff. And you're going to want to hear her story because she was raised in a Christian church, but then things evolved with her relationship with God and how she felt about it. It's amazing. So welcome, Allison. Let's just dive in. Welcome to the
Okay.
show.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm so delighted to be here. And, my work is centered around mythology, and mythologies are stories that talk to us about gods and how humans have explored and deepened their relationship with gods in many, many different contexts across cultures from all over the world. So that's been a deep source of fascination for me for the entirety of my career working with myth. And it's just been so lovely to see the ways in which all of these old reckonings with gods and with divine energy show up in our storytelling throughout all of the course of human history. So, I'm happy to talk about my own personal faith or all of these wonderful stories that we have as our common heritage as humans. And there's just so much fun stuff to talk about. So, yes, I'm happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, you bet. You bet. Okay, so before we dive into all of that, which is going to be so cool, I want people to get to know you.
Yeah.
So I would like to hear about 8-year-old Allison.
Well, 8-year-old Allison. So it's an interesting. Okay, so if you forgive me, I'm going to do this. I'm going to back it up just a tiny bit to 5-year-old Allison because that was the moment of the biggest seismic change in my life and the biggest and most important part of my story starting out. And, I do this a lot when I talk with my coaching clients and in my workshops and things that I teach is we look at our creation myths, if you will. Like we look at those stories of our childhood and our origins and how they shape us, how the opinions of our parents and our peers as children create our identity when we're young and how that can shift over time and how sometimes we can find that our stories that we grew up in like that don't serve us anymore. So for me, my creation myth is around the event that happened when I was 5, and that was my parents' divorce. So my dad and mom met at Vandenberg Air Force Base in California during the big space races of the late 1960s, and they got married in Central California, which is where my dad was from. But my dad, he had seen all of those planes going out from California into the Pacific Theater during World War II, and he was a really small kid. And he just was obsessed with aviation and he became a pilot, but he really wanted to live this great life of adventure. And so he became a bush pilot and he wanted to go to Alaska in order to fulfill that dream. So when I was a year old, he moved the family to Alaska with no real plan in place. And so we lived there. And in fact, I grew up there. My brother was born there a couple of years later. And about the time that I was 5, the cracks started to show in my parents' marriage. And I don't have a lot of memory of this, but it was let's just say, not the most elegant divorce, not the most kind divorce. They both kidnapped us back and forth. My dad hid us in the bush of Alaska for a while. And all of this was happening at the same time that I was starting to form my first permanent memories. And it was a lot of trauma and it was a lot of fear and it was a lot of, where's my mom? Because my mom left. She was the one that left. So after all of this, all the dust was settled through all of this, my dad ended up with custody of my brother and I, which was very rare at that time. And so we ended up growing up in a single parent household. He didn't get remarried until I was in college. And it just became this event in our lives. And, my dad was not a big reader. You can tell from what you can see behind me that I am one, and I got that from my mom. But my dad was a storyteller. So what he would do is he would, he could read to us, but it was never that exciting because he wasn't great at it. But he was a fantastic storyteller. So I grew up with all these wonderful stories about bears and crashing the airplane in the wilderness and craziness and just all of this stuff. So it became clear to me, I was always a really thoughtful kid, and it became clear to me pretty early on that stories were important. That part of who we were as human beings was communicated through how we told stories to each other. And, I got really interested in mythology from a really young age. Like, okay, if these are the stories we've had for the longest, fairy tales and folklore and all of these things, legends, what is it about these stories that makes them last? What is it about these stories that we've been telling in my family? This is forming my identity as a child. And we're creating this world that we want to believe to be true, or that we really do believe to be true. We do create our realities often through the stories that we tell about our lives, and I could see that happening. And it got really interesting later because, I didn't have a lot of a relationship with my mom while I was growing up. We sort of lost touch with each other for many years. But when I was about 30, I reconnected with her. And then I got to hear all of those stories that I had heard from my dad from the other side, and they were very different in many ways, right? I mean, she's like, "Well, he never told you this thing that happened," or whatever. So that was really interesting too, and that was the beginning of my mythology career. That was all happening when I was doing my graduate work and really embracing mythology as a field of study that I thought could help me understand this. And I was, because I was raised in a charismatic church in Anchorage as a child, I saw, heard in the services that I would listen to all these stories from the Bible, and I could see the power of them that they had over the people. We're all in there trying to figure out, how do I live a good human life? How do I navigate this thing that we find ourselves born into with as much love and grace and kindness and just being a good human as I can. And we all fall down and we all make mistakes, but what I love so much about people that take their spiritual and religious life seriously, that they're constantly reckoning with what it means to be a better human. Let me keep trying, even though I fall. And Christianity has this beautiful kind of lesson of that, right? Like sometimes I'm going to fall. In fact, I'm going to fall all the time, but I'm going to get myself back up and I'm going to find forgiveness. And I know that this forgiveness and this love is always waiting for me. And that allows me to get back up and try again instead of just saying, oh, forget it. I just might as well be a bad person or whatever. Like it really does give this beautiful sense of it's okay to fail, but it's also okay to get back up and step back into it again and show back. Catholics go to confession and they unburden themselves with that. So for me, I know this is a very long answer to the question that you asked me, but it really led me to wanting to understand, why does story matter so much? Why are these stories that I'm hearing in church, hearing from my family, hearing from our church youth groups and things that we were doing, all of these things were enormously compelling. And also the other part of it is everything that I went through with that divorce was very traumatic for me. And the only solace I could really find was in books. I was an early reader. And the thing that kept me from feeling too scared when the adults in my life weren't really showing up the way that I needed them to was, I could go and I could read Anne of Green Gables, or I could read Little House on the Prairie, or I could read the Narnia books or whatever. And I could find a place where I felt safe and stories protected me in a way. So all of those things together is what led me to the work that I'm doing now, which is to help other folks understand, okay, this is your story, this is what it has been, this is what it can be in the future. And what it really allowed me to do too was create a beautiful life for myself. I mean, my husband and I are celebrating our 20th wedding anniversary at the end of this month. And I never thought that that would be a reality for me. I never did, because my parents divorced so badly, and then they both had three marriages and all ending in divorce. And I never had that model for me at all. Like I had no idea what a good marriage looked like. So to be able to find my way through to that as an adult, I mean, what a gift that has been for me to create a happy family, to create a kind of family that was different from the one that I knew growing up. So, a very long and long-winded answer to what you asked, but and we can get into more detail about many of these things when you ask your second question. So,
Yeah, yeah. Well, I love the back and forth and having conversation
mm,
and as you're going, because there was a lot to unwrap. It
mm,
was so good, but a lot to unwrap. I love
mm,
it that you recognized story
Hmm.
that you recognize that you're hearing these stories, and the stories are having an impact on your life, and stories in the books and stories in the Bible and stories whatever, and your own personal story.
Hmm.
And so let's talk about your own personal story
Yeah.
for a minute. So
Yeah.
yeah, great trauma, your parents
Hmm.
divorce, and then your mom's not around.
Yeah.
So and it wasn't obviously a pleasant divorce,
No.
but quite often people still have both parents in their life,
Right.
and you just had your dad. And
Right.
so that that is trauma. How do
Mhm.
you deal with your past story? Like how do you uh reframe it as an adult compared to what you thought about it when you were a child?
Well, one of the things that mythology teaches us that I think I found really helpful is that we can change our story that we're living in, right? We see a lot of evidence of this in the myths around the world, right? That okay, and this is what I was alluding to a little bit earlier. We talk often about what is your creation myth and understanding your like really can look at your life as if it is a personal mythology of your very own. And doing it that way is actually really, really helpful because what it does is, often like when I teach workshops and things, one of the first exercises that I will often do is, if you have a particular part of your life or your story that you're struggling with, you're trying to work your way through, I have people write it out or express it somehow, but then we recast it and as a myth. So you will tell your story as if it was a myth. Like, once upon a time this happened, or a long, long ago, centuries ago this happened, or whatever. And the thing that's really psychologically helpful about framing it that way is what it allows you to do is it allows you to create a distance between yourself and the story. So if you talk about yourself as if it was over here instead of here, like physically held in the body, then you get a new angle on your own story, right? So you can see it from a different point of view a little bit. So that can be really helpful. And once I started to work with myth in this way, and I started to look at my own story as if it was a myth, and it had a lot of really mythic elements. I mean, Alaska, I don't know if you've ever been there, but it's a very mythic landscape. It's these mountains are enormous and there's these wild animals. And, I had my own grizzly bear as a child, which is a whole story of its own. Like, I mean, it was a crazy life to be out in the bush all the time. My dad was this pilot. We'd, be out 1,000 miles from the nearest civilization. I mean, that's a very unusual way to grow up. So it gave me this sense of like spectacle and largeness that myths often have, right? This sense that they're bigger than a human being, and that may have been what kind of got me feeling comfortable with this field too, right? So I had this story that was told to me as a child about who I was. My dad, bless him, was a wonderful man in so many ways, but he had very old-fashioned ideas about the purpose of women. And to him, women were, either to be wives or to be daughters that were supporting men and were the helpmeet, and there was a lot of that in the church that I grew up in, right? That women exist only to support men in whatever capacity is necessary. And I found that very stifling and very limiting. And I wanted more out of my life than to just be a wife and a mother and a helpmeet and the house cleaner and the cook, all of these things, and more than just a support system for a man's life and a man's career. So I really felt very motivated to find a new version of a story that allowed me to be in the full expression of my own abilities, my own creativity, and the power of my own work and my ability to contribute outside of that context. So that was something that kind of led me into it. And when I started reading stories that were kind of outside of the ones I heard in church, I got a really deep affiliation with the goddess Athena from Greek mythology because she had this kind of father connection like I did. She's a goddess that was born out of the mind of Zeus. There was no mother. And she's this goddess of wisdom and she's this goddess of strategy and she's whole in and of herself. And it's not about her relationship with children or a partner. She's a virgin goddess, which just doesn't mean like literal virginity. It means like you are independent and whole in and of yourself by yourself. You don't exist in relationship to someone else. So I once I started to read her myths, I felt a real connection to her, and that helped me kind of find my way out of that framing that I had been raised in. So, that really helped me to say, okay, maybe there is more to this. Maybe I don't just have to be that. Maybe I have more to offer than that. So So by approaching it that way, it made a huge difference for my life. And then I was able to start sharing that on later on with the folks that came to my work. So yeah.
Wow, wow, yeah. And it makes so much sense to kind of get your story outside of you
Right. Hmm.
because it can be something that you just hang on to and
Yeah.
gravel with and let it be a big part of you. And
Yeah.
the things that we go through certainly affect us and certainly shape us and mold us into who we are today. The negative things that we go through, if you're able to reframe them, I did this thing. I lived a year, I dedicated a year to figuring out the true meaning of love. And one
Mm.
of the things that I found out when I was working on Love Keeps No Record of Wrongs, what that means is we're in control of the narrative.
Right.
We control the narrative always, right?
Right.
We control the narrative. And often we let other people control our narrative. So
Yeah.
in getting it out of you, no longer was your dad in control of your narrative,
Right. Right.
right? Or the divorce in control of your narrative. So the narrative from the past can be reshaped just like the narrative that's today, how
Yeah.
you perceive things or how you take things in today is 100% on you.
Yeah.
It's completely up to you. And I love it that you can go back and reframe the narrative and get it so it's not hindering you in some way
Right.
because there's so many things that can hold us back.
Absolutely. Well, and we get stuck in these stories, right? Our parents tell us you are this. And usually we believe them because what do we know, right? Like you're not athletic or you're not that smart or you are meant to do this or you need to be a lawyer like your dad before you or whatever it is. I mean, these our parents are trying to help us by telling us who we are, and but eventually we have to decide for ourselves, is that in fact true? I mean, I think it's an important question for anyone to ask themselves like we have these unconscious assumptions about the people that we are based on a lot of that. One of the things for me was, I thought of myself as a bookworm. This kid that was had their nose in a book all the time. That was always the story that was told about me. And as an adult, it's not that I didn't still love books, but I also wanted to recognize that I could, in fact, be an athlete and that I could go and, be in my body in a different way. And it didn't just have to be, that's part of the thing mind. And for many, many years, and to say, okay, you know what? So I intentionally explored what I would call the archetype of Artemis, this different virgin goddess from Greek mythology, where she's this athletic person running around the forest and has all of this strength and confidence in her body. And I really intentionally tried to pull that into my life because I wanted to find what I was capable of physically as a physical person and find a deeper connection to the body. So, there's a million ways that can shake out in a life. And if you feel like there's something missing and that you would like to explore about who you are, those little calls are important and they need to be listened to, and to find, okay, what is it that I may be that I can explore and maybe I can set this story down and make a new one. So,
Yeah, so good, so good. So with all of that, with being able to kind of reshape our story or redefine our story in a whole different way so that it doesn't stop us from doing things and whatever. You talked about how important it is to when you become an adult to go, well, who the heck am I? Right? Like,
yeah,
what do I like? What do
right.
I want to do? And I think that happens a couple different times in life. I think it happens after you graduate from high school and you're going to
Mhm.
college and you're like, I don't know what I want to do. What do I want to do? Do
Yeah,
I already know? What are my skills, my
right.
skill sets or my favorite things to do, whatever it happens to be. And then I think there's other times in life that it happens, and a big time in life is the kids are gone. You're an
Right.
empty nester.
Yep.
And all along you've been mom and you've been wife and you've been working and you've been whatever it
Hmm.
is that you've been doing, chauffeuring and coaching and helping with
Yeah.
homework, all the stuff that then you're at this point where you're like, what do I like?
Right.
Who am I? Right?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm in that right now. I've got not fully, but my oldest son's starting college next month, and because I do the kind of work that I do, we've got some myths that are about this very moment, about when the child leaves the mother, and goes off. And there's some beautiful examples from mythology to kind of show us what happens when you're in midlife and you've done all the things that were expected of you. And it's not even just your children. We've got people divorcing after 20 years of marriage or starting over when they're in midlife, and their children have been raised, and you've done all the things. You got the career, you got your marriage, you got your child, you got your how whatever your goals were that you were working on for the first couple of decades of your life. Either you've accomplished them, or maybe you're still working on them, maybe you're giving up on them, maybe whatever. But there is a pivotal moment that happens where you say, is this what it is? What else is there? What do I do now? How do I find meaning now? I mean, this is a really important question that so many of us are asking, but that's what's so beautiful is it's all there in the mist because we've been wrestling with these questions forever. We get this amount of time on this planet as a human being. We do all the things, and eventually you're like, okay, what happens on the other side of that? And luckily for us, we've got this propensity to write them down, well, not write them down, tell them orally, but then also write them down. And so this is to me the power of mythology, and why it's so relevant and so helpful is it's allowed me as a writer and speaker and coach myself to say, here are some myths that we can look at together to say this is how it was done before. We don't have to like look at it literally. It's not literal. It's all metaphoric, right? So if you're going through something, myths, like the essential pattern of a myth is that you are dying to an old version of yourself and you're being reborn into a new version. And because we're constantly going through times like this where either you had a child, or your child's growing up, or your marriage is beginning or it's ending, or your job is ending or beginning. Like these are all pivotal moments that are happening over and over. And the essential pattern of mythology is separation, initiation, and return. Those are the three words that sum up most myths, right? So what is happening in that period of initiation? How can, and it shows us thousands of times over and over, like, okay, this is what you do, right? And a big part of the work that I'm doing now is around the difference between that initiation and just surviving the darkest moments of our lives, right? So we go through things and we have the ability to learn from them and gain wisdom. And a big part of the point of all of that is to go through our tough moments in a way that we have something to share on the other side to help the next person out, right? So to me, that's the real power of it is the people that came before us left us all these stories. And myths aren't commonly studied like this, right? We read scripture, we read the Bible or the Talmud or whatever, but myths aren't really looked at that way. So okay, now we've got this repository of knowledge, and it says, okay, you're going to go through hard things. Here's how we did ours. Here's how we went through it. This is what worked. This is what failed. For whatever it's worth to you, let me share with you what we had to go through. And then we do it ourselves and we go through this hard thing and we come out the other side. And if we're lucky and if we've done it thoughtfully, we now have something to share that can help somebody else out. And to me, that's when we talk about that question of what do you do with midlife, or what do you do when you've gone through something? To me, that's what it is. It's that it teaches us how to bring whatever it was back to the community to help someone else. That's for me is the real power of it. So, this conversation we're having right now, you and I are sharing our abilities, our energy with all of your listeners. And I'm sharing what I've learned, you're sharing what you've learned. And what that can do now is, we've been through some stuff, right? I know you have, I have. We've been through moments that we felt like we were going to survive, but we did. And that created something that now we can say, okay, you're starting on your journey. You're going through that hard moment. You're dying to the old version of yourself. You don't have to be afraid. You're not alone. We are all here, us living people, our ancestors, our storytellers of the past. We have this beautiful, sacred connection throughout all of human history so that the next person that has to do something that's terrifying doesn't have to do it by themselves. And to me, that is the most beautiful thing about all of this is this sense that we have obligation to each other, that we need to show up in community for other people, that we need to do our very best to help others that are struggling, and that we can rely on other people to help us when we are struggling ourselves. We've got all of these thousands of years of evidence of this. So,
Yeah, and it's so true. I always admire people who do go through something and then use it. And which is how you heal from
Yeah,
things too,
exactly.
right? So it's the greatest thing that you can do for yourself to heal
Right.
from grief, to heal from
Right.
trauma, whatever, is to give, to
Right.
serve, to give.
Absolutely.
And so you can use your story, you can use what you've been through to help somebody else who's just beginning that journey,
Hmm.
just got the diagnosis, just
Right.
sign the divorce papers,
Yeah,
whatever it happens to
exactly.
be. And yeah, and I love that. And I love that we're not the first ones going through this stuff, right? Like,
Absolutely
uh,
not.
we're not the only one, and certainly not the first one. And
Yeah.
that it dates back years and years and years and thousands of years,
Right.
and that the stories then were passed on so
Hmm.
that we can learn from how did people handle things in the
Right.
past. And so with that knowledge, knowing that, which is also good, what would you say, like, in transition? So like the midlife sort of transition, what stories from the past would you point at to go, oh, this was good from that story,
Yeah.
this could help you from that story?
Right. Well, I will say that one of the beautiful things about world myth is that you get to see not only the success stories but also the real failures. We have stories of both of those sides, right? And I think both of them are important because hearing about failures teaches us that we can make it through, right? We know that even if we do it really badly, if we really, swing and miss on our attempted solution to this problem, that there's still wisdom to be gained from that. And that's really, you don't have to do this perfectly. You don't have to um, make every step exactly the way that it should be. And so there is a story from Greek myth that I talk to a lot of women about, especially with the issue of the child growing up. And that's the story of Demeter from Greek mythology. So her daughter Persephone is the goddess of spring, and she's abducted by Hades, who's the god of the underworld, and taken into the underworld. And Demeter becomes distraught. She's the goddess of the harvest and any live and growing things. So all the animals and all the plants, because of her grief, are no longer able to grow because she misses her daughter so much. But essentially, it's a story about what happens when your child reaches adulthood and leaves you because she does not handle it well. And I see echoes of this now in these, helicopter moms that follow their kids to college and yell at the professors for giving them a B, or the ones that call up their bosses and say, why did you give my kid a bad performance? Like that's Demeter or Demeter. I mean, this is I'm going to call her Demeter and Demeter because I'm never really sure how people have heard the name, but that's who I'm talking about. Um, and so we still see that impulse to hold on to the child when they need to step into their adult life, when they need to be separated from the mother. And I'm in the middle of this negotiation with my 18-year-old son right now, and it has been going on for a few years, right? Like, boy, I really want to be there and smooth the way from him and make the phone calls and but he's figuring out he's starting college in the fall, and it's like, okay, you don't have your housing set up yet, well, you better figure that out. Boy, I want to make the call. Right, I really want to make it. And this is it, right? It's like, okay, so Demeter just honestly, she fell apart and it almost destroyed the entire planet because there was no new growth. There's no food, there's no animals, there's no sacrifices to the gods. So they're starving too in their own way. And the gods finally say, we got to do something. This is not good. And they figure out where Persephone has gone. And I don't know how familiar your listeners are with this story, but Persephone has been in the underworld for a while with Hades, and she has, in fact, eaten the food of the underworld and has had 6 pomegranate seeds. And so now she is connected to the land of the dead. And we end up with a story where she is both the queen of the underworld and the wife of Hades, but also is allowed to visit her mother for part of the year. And what it's doing for one is it's explaining the seasons. Why do things die in the winter and come back in the summer? And so you get this sense of Demeter's grieving, and that's why everything dies for a while. So the myths can sometimes accomplish that purpose. But what we also see is, so we know the plot points of the story. Like we understand that Persephone goes into the underworld with Hades, and the Demeter is grieving this and everything that happens to her. But what is beautiful about the kind of work that I do is that it allows us to speculate as to why that's happening or what the intentions were, the emotions were of these characters, these mythic characters. So we have questions like, did Persephone get abducted, or did she do this intentionally to get away from her mother? Right. So, so there's a lot of really interesting things to unpack when you look at a myth like this. There's a myth that I really love that I work with a lot. It's the myth of Inanna, the descent of Inanna from Mesopotamian mythology. And she decides to go into it's another underworld descent story, right? So she decides to go into the underworld, to visit her sister, and she has to go through all of these gates and give up parts of herself, and gets down there and she's naked in front of her sister. Her sister kills her and hangs her on a meat hook for 3 days. So we're in the underworld for 3 days, which may sound familiar to some of your listeners, and then is brought back to life and goes out. And so what it accomplishes is we have this way to kind of feel like some of the things we have to give up when we go through this, right? You have to let go of parts of yourself sometimes. Well, this is my identity as a married woman, and I have to let go of that. I have to let go of this friend group, or I have to let go of being in the PTA because my kid is gone now and I'm not involved with those people anymore. So the beautiful thing about myths, looking at like Demeter's story or Inanna's story, we can kind of hone in on just sometimes individual images, sometimes individual lines of the myths or individual words. And they really do open up beautifully to analysis and to understanding. So we can find, when I work with my coaching clients, I find this a lot. We'll look at a myth very carefully and say, okay, here's where Demeter did this exact thing, and then it'll something new will be sparked psychologically for the person, and they'll start to understand a little bit more deeply what it is that they're feeling about their own child going away, or the relationship changing as they become more independent. So it really does serve us very well because it's almost like a blank slate where you can kind of interpret it in the way that serves you the best. So yeah.
Yeah, so interesting. And yeah, and to learn from it, to see the mistakes that
Right.
were made and
Yeah.
also see the good stuff that happened and the process in between and all of that.
Yeah.
So interesting. I find it very fascinating because I don't know that there's a lot of people like you, Allison,
Mhm.
who draw from that, draw
Right.
from the wisdom of the past, which there's so much wisdom in so many
Yeah.
stories and so many places. There's all
That's
this
true.
wisdom to draw from that you don't have to feel like you're the
Right.
only one going through it or the first one going through it, and share that wisdom
Yeah.
and be open to it. So yeah, so you went on quite a journey to figure all this stuff out, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
what led you on the journey to begin with?
Well, when I was about 30, again, I was feeling a little lost, and I had a lit degree from college, and I was working and I didn't really love what I was doing. I was trying to find my way. And I was always really interested in religion and psychology and sociology and archaeology and literature. And about that time, I discovered the work of this guy named Joseph Campbell. He has written beautifully about mythology. He wrote a book that's very famous called The Hero with a Thousand Faces, in which he explores this idea of that descent and reemergence of that pattern that exists in myths all over the world. And so when I say separation, initiation, and return, that phrase comes from Hero with a Thousand Faces. So I started reading his work and I just became fascinated with it. I found a graduate degree and it was in mythology and Jungian psychology, and I got that. Um, and Campbell's work led me to read Carl Jung's work and James Hillman and a lot of other psychologists and anthropologists and other people. And it really all of that study that I did for many years at the beginning of my career, it really did set me up with enough for me to start to explore on my own, right? Like it gives you this framework that you need. And then I can say, okay, well, this is my story and this is what I have to bring to that conversation and to that. And that was the beginning of it for me, Campbell's work. And he died when I was 17. I never met him, obviously, but I've been involved with that community, for a long time. And they have a foundation that holds his work now. And I, taught through them and done many things over the years, and they're very good friends of mine. So that just that by that one author is what started all of this for me. And there are a lot of other great ones, and I've discovered many of them over the years. But that was the springboard for me into this work. Just the way that it combined all of my interests, right? So let's talk about religion, and let's talk about stories, and let's talk about psychology and how the human mind works, and how it, and especially because I was very interested, and I've always been in understanding how we engage with the sacred. I wanted to know what it was about that feeling that I had sometimes in church or even in the forest or with my baby or with my husband, like what are these moments that feel different? And we have that. This is something that's been understood. The Greeks had a separate word for time that was describing how we feel when we are worshiping or when we are with our lover or with our baby or just that time at a time. Sometimes when we're painting or writing or whatever it is that we're doing creatively, to recognize that that is a separate kind of time than the regular stuff, to me was a huge revelation. So, so now I've got that insight and I'm going forward with that. And it just, this is what we do creatively when we're doing this is like, okay, I'm going to take all these ideas from other people. I'm going to alchemize them into something new through my own experiences and bring something new out into the world. And sometimes I teach creativity workshops, and I love to do that because so many folks are intimidated. Well, they're like, well, I'm never going to be Shakespeare, or I'm never going to be Picasso, or whatever. But what I love to remind folks is that you are a unique artifact in the history of human life. Your experiences are not the same as anyone else's. Even you could be a conjoined twin and still not have had the same experiences as your twin because your thoughts were different and your observations were different and the books you read were different and the art that you enjoyed was different and all of the music, everything. All of those things swirl together inside of a human mind and they can create something that's never existed before. And this is why I love so much to encourage people to share on their story because you don't have to, you can write a book or not. You can paint or dance or make a company or create an app or, there's something new that you can put into the world that would never exist otherwise and never could exist without you doing it. And I find that really empowering. Like, you are magic and I am, and so is everyone, because if we can find our way through all of this and keep our sense of love and connectedness and community with other people, keep the responsibility to figure out our own way and also help other people do the same, if we center that, then magic really does happen. And I've seen it so many times. I've seen so many beautiful things happen with people's hearts and minds and spirits through an examination of their lives in this way. This is what gets me up in the morning, right? It's so beautiful to see people really figure things out and to heal and to not only heal, but also help someone else heal in the process. I mean, how amazing is that for anyone to have the privilege of being a witness to that and to be able to show up as someone's ally to help make that happen? I mean, I could not come up with a better job. I mean, this is just the best thing ever. And I'm sure this is true for you too, right? Like you're a writer and a speaker, you're doing all of these things yourself. You have the privilege of watching how you talk about these things make other people's lives better. And I can't think of anything better than that. Yeah.
I totally agree with that. I have the best job in the whole wide world and I have fun everything that I do
Yeah.
and yes, to be able to see people's lives transform, change,
Mhm.
to be able to help people in whatever capacity it
Yeah.
means, to be able to better somebody's life just with like what we're doing today,
Yeah. Yeah.
with
Exactly.
hearing you and all of your wisdom that you're dropping. And I it's just so true. That's
Yeah.
why we both like to get up in the morning and get
That's right.
excited about the day that we
That's
get to
right.
spend.
Right.
Yes, and so man, I love that you talk about creativity
Mm.
because that's something that I think as a kid, you're supposed to color in the lines, right? So you got to do it a certain way.
Yeah.
And then you're judged
Right.
because you have art class. And either your picture goes on the wall or it goes home
Hmm.
with you and goes in the
Yeah.
trash or whatever it is that it does,
Yeah.
right? So it's uh so often I think we're held back create
Right.
creatively and
Right.
we're told not to daydream or use our
Yeah.
imagination or whatever, but that's where things are birthed
Right.
is
Right.
within our imagination and
Right.
expressed in our creativity. So how do you get back to that when you feel like you've just kind of left it behind in your childhood because someone told you to or for whatever reason?
Well, I mean, and this is what it's so easy for us to forget. And there's this beautiful insight from Carl Jung that I would love to share at this moment, which is And I use this in my creativity workshop. So, I'm a writer. I write every day, and I feel very comfortable writing. And one of the first things I got to learn in grad school was I had a professor, and she was teaching this personal mythology class. And she said, well, okay, we're going to look at your story, your personal myth, but you're not going to write it. You're going to draw it. And I got really mad because I decided when I was a child that I was a bad artist. I maybe had those experiences where my art went in the garbage, and I just decided that was the story that I created for myself. And what I did is I did the drawing, and I was kind of grumping about it the whole time in my head. And it was astonishing because this extraordinary insight came to me that way. And what Carl Jung wisely figured out is that sometimes you have to do the things that's not comfortable for you in order to allow the light of the unconscious mind to come through. If you do the thing you do regularly, it's not gonna it's too familiar, right? You have to break through in a different way. So you have to seek discomfort. And so for me, when I do my creativity workshops, I put this in there with a lot of intention, like, okay, if you want to write, we're not doing that. Okay, here's some sculpting clay, or we're going to dance, or we're going to draw, and people get really upset because they want to do what's comfortable. And I get that. I mean, that's where I was in that class, but it's extraordinary what can come out because the unconscious mind is trying to tell you things that it wants you to know. And so we talk a lot about like those moments when you've just woken up or those moments when you're just falling asleep. You have kind of this thinner barrier between yourself and your unconscious mind. So that's why we write our dreams down sometimes. If you're dream journaling, you get into that space a little bit, and that's kind of some of that sacred time that I was discussing before. So if you feel scared, remember that that is a hugely good thing because that is going to give you what you need to figure this out. So if you seek something like, I mean, it's kind of like why, we exercise, you go to the gym, you go on a run or whatever, and it hurts a little. It should hurt just the right amount, right? You need to be feeling a little of discomfort in order to find growth. And we can carry that lesson through into other parts of our lives. And we don't do that often. We understand that working out creates sore muscles, but we don't really seek out the same discomfort in our minds or in our creative lives. And I think that that's an incredibly important thing to recognize is that if we, I mean, and I'm not talking about like true suffering and trauma, like it goes too far and that can really hold people back. But if you just seek a little bit of if you find something that you're a little bit afraid of, like, well, I want to paint, but I've never painted and I'm scared I'm going to be bad. Well, yeah, you are going to be. That's what's going to happen. But that's not the point of this. You don't have to, go and put your museum, put your art painting in a museum on the first day, right? You're learning about yourself. You're going to go through this journey through the underworld, like these myths show us. And you might end up in that museum eventually, maybe not. Maybe it'll show you something else that you need to know. But what it's doing though is, if you're afraid of being creative, that's a real blessing and something that we should feel really grateful for because that gives you an opportunity to find a lot of new wisdom and new growth through the process of going through that. And if we can center that idea first, it makes it a lot less scary, right? If you say it's okay if I fail, or it's okay if I'm bad at it, or if it's okay if someone judges me and says that I'm not good enough, because who cares what they think? Like honestly, let's do this work together. And I had to go through a lot of bad writing before I started being good at it. And everyone that's good at anything had to do that. And we forget that because we compare ourselves to people on social media or to what we read in bookstores or in museums or whatever. And sorry, that is something that we can explore if we frame it just a little bit of a different way. So, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I like that. It's okay to
Yeah.
get a little uncomfortable and
Yeah.
do something new and get out of your box, get out of your
Yeah.
comfort zone
Yeah, exactly.
and yeah, because that's when things happen too, when you really grow and
Hmm.
expand and whatever. I'd like you to touch too a little bit more on when you were talking about time and
Sure.
how time is different because I've never heard this before
Mm-hmm.
that you're talking about, but I certainly have experienced this before where I on a Sunday afternoon put on
Hmm.
a Bob Ross video and then sit and paint and
Yeah.
time goes by and I don't even know the time has gone by. Like
Yeah.
it has just gone by. And
Yeah.
You become so immersed in something that everything else around you,
Hmm.
or I have to admit, driving down the highway sometimes,
Yeah.
all of a sudden you're like, I'm
Yeah.
at exit. What?
Yeah.
Like, what happened to the exits before?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, so explain that a bit.
Okay. Well, so I'll just give you the words itself. So the Greeks have two words for time in ancient Greek. The first is the word chronos, and you hear this a couple of ways now. Like chronometer is a way to measure time, and you hear the word chronos. If you think about the symbols we have from like New Year's, it's that old man with the scythe and like the little diaper that's the year going out. That's Chronos. He's a figure from Greek mythology. He's the father of Zeus, and he represents regular ordinary clock time. Like this is your running errands time or you're doing the dishes time or your whatever. Just how we get through life most of the time, right? Like we got to do our stuff, right? We got to do our work, we got to do our whatever. So there's that. But then we also have another word and it's the word is kairos. Kairos is how it's spelled. And the origins of the word trace back to archery, as it turns out. And it's a word that is used to describe the archer pulling back the bow and how they know exactly the right time to let go. Okay, so when you're a good archer, you know when it's time, when you've lined up your arrow properly, and now you release the arrow. And but what it means more fully is that sacred time that we're discussing, right? So, we have another word for it now, flow or being in the zone. Our athletes talk about this. There's this beautiful work by this Czech scientist named he's okay. I know how to. It took me forever to learn how to say this, but I'm going to say it. His name is Mihai Csikszentmihalyi. I had to
Huh?
memorize
That's
how to
pretty
say
good.
that, but his book is called Flow, and it's about this exact thing. And so if you're interested, if you're the kind of person that likes research studies or knowing the science of something, you might, if you're interested in this, you might go and find that book. But it's this beautiful way to describe all of those time out of time moments, and we all know what they are. I mean, you're talking about the highway, or being in your different situations, with your child or with your people that you love or whatever. If you've lost track of time and you're really happy with that, that is Kairos. So when we talk about creativity, I actually do, you can cultivate this, right? And this is what I do every day when I sit down to write. I will do all of my Chronos things that I want to do. I'll make my errand to the bank or get the dishes done or, feed the cats, whatever. And then I create a ritual that kind of encapsulates some Kairos time in my writing. So I will say a prayer or just kind of give myself a little guided meditation to say, okay, this space that I'm creating is for the pursuit of the sacred creative work. And usually I write better by doing that. So I say, okay, I'm going to write for an hour and a half or whatever the time is I have that day. I'm going to write this, or I'm going to write this particular chapter or whatever it is I'm doing. And then when I'm done, when I'm ready to stop, then I ritualistically close the space. So what I'm doing is I'm trying to create like a little bit of mini sacred space in my office so that I can acknowledge that what I'm doing is inviting that Kairos energy and Kairos time into the space with me. And I do this all the time. Like, I do a lot of rituals in my workshops and, we do this. We say, okay, we're joining together. We're in a room together. We're going to try to explore this stuff. We are going to make a space and time that is separate from ordinary life. And we are going to make a little bubble around ourselves of sacred time. And, it's so fascinating to me because my husband's an engineer. He's a graduate of Caltech. He's very interested in physics and science and everything. And, we've got these stories that from mythology that are ancient. And it's almost like the physics are catching up to it in a way. Like we've got this evidence from physics that says that there are these other worlds out there that are, this many worlds theory of physics that there's this very kind of thin curtain between us and these other worlds. And you see all of the ways that these show up in mythologies, right? So you got the world of the gods, the world of the dead, the world of the fairies, or, whatever. And so it's really just kind of narrowing that space into another space of that God energy, if you will, heaven or whatever. So we'll invite some of that energy to pour into our human existence for a little while. So I don't know, like it doesn't always work. Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes my head's just not there. But creating a bubble of sacred time for ourselves in our days can be a really effective way to feel more centered, to feel more present with the work that we're going to do. And I don't know, I find it a really useful way to frame how I spend my life because I'm either in one of those two times. And for because I know that you have many Christian listeners, I'm going to mention this. This concept came to me from a Christian writer named Madeleine L'Engle. She wrote the book A Wrinkle in Time and many other wonderful nonfiction books that I discuss. And she talks about Kairos time, and it's very much a concept that's very prevalent in her some of her work. So, if you're interested in this, especially in a Christian context, seek out some of her creativity works that she wrote. There's one called the Rock That Is Higher, Story is Truth, and things of this nature. So, there's more to explore on that side of it as well. So, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I'm glad that you mentioned that because I think too often we want to separate Christianity from science or
Mm,
Christianity from whatever. And I always think, well, I believe in God and God created it all.
right.
So there shouldn't,
Yeah.
right? There shouldn't be a
Yeah.
separation. It's not a this or, but it's a and.
Right.
It's this
Yeah, well,
and this.
Madeleine L'Engle's work was very brilliant at that because she really did believe in the sacred nature of science, and there's so much science in so many of her novels for children, and it's just something that she really wrestled with throughout her career as a writer. And I know her. If you haven't read her nonfiction, it's a really special experience. So I'm just putting that out there because I don't think it's as well known as A Wrinkle in Time or some of her other books for children, but it's out there. You can probably find it. And yeah, if this concept interests you, check that out.
Yeah, I think it's so interesting. And I think it's interesting that you can invite it, that
Yeah,
you don't have to just all of a sudden realize you're in it,
right, right.
but that you can invite it. And
Yeah,
it's absolutely a thing. Like I don't know if anybody has not experienced
right,
it. I'm sure that everyone has,
right.
but not recognizing what it is or not realizing what it is. And so yeah, thanks for sharing that because
Of course.
that's some really cool stuff. And sharing some places that people can go to explore it
Hmm.
even more, I think is
Yeah.
pretty cool. So, yeah, so you get into this space when you are going into a creative venture, when you're going to
Hmm.
start to write, when you're going to do, when you need that, when
Right.
you need your mind to be more clear. That's what I find when I write is
Hmm.
how do I clear out all the other stuff? How do I
Right.
let the to-do list
Right.
go, right?
Yeah.
How do I
Yeah.
forget the laundry for a minute or
Right.
what, whatever it is, and just let it flow, let it
Right.
flow. And there's a thing called writer's block, of course.
Yes, there is.
And I
Yeah.
wonder if that's what that is it's not, you're not letting yourself get into that state.
Yeah, and when I have people that are dealing with writer's block, this is one of the first things I tell them to do is, let put that. I mean, you can really do a lot with setting your intention, right? So if can be surrounded by chaos and still create this little bubble for yourself. And it really does help. It helps you focus. And it's not even just for creative work, but relationally too, right? If you need to have a conversation with someone that is maybe outside the context of Chronos time, like I do this with my coaching clients, right? I do this exact thing with them because I want to bring my best and I want, all of this sacred energy to kind of channel through me to try to help them as much as I can. So if you're in a workshop with me or you're a coaching client of mine, you're going to have experience of this sort of ritual because I want to protect our time together as much as possible. And I want to bring as much wisdom and energy into that as I can. And this is a tool, one of the tools that I use in order to make that happen. It's something that your listeners can try as well. So, if you have a serious conversation you need to have with someone, try ritualistically inviting that Kairos time and energy in. You can just like it's like just say a little prayer, just like kind of center yourself for a moment and create that space for yourself. But then also don't forget when you're done, close it. Thank it, let it go with gratitude, right? Thank you for being here. Thank you for showing up. Thank you for creating this little space for me. Even if it didn't work that well, it's just like a muscle that needs to be exercised a little bit, right? Like, okay, I'm going to practice creating that little island of sacred space for myself and in my relationship, right? So if you need to have a serious conversation with your husband or your mother or whatever, your child, try that. See if you can bring that little bit of stillness at the heart of it into that space with each other.
Yeah, that's so good. That is so good. Yes, and even with conversation, I wouldn't have thought of that
Mm.
because in talking about it, I'm thinking, oh my gosh, and writing
Yeah,
absolutely, or
yeah.
any sort of creative something you're going to do, but to bring it into conversation as well, to be able
Yeah.
to have time act differently for you, so
Mhm.
that the
Right.
conversation can go differently.
Yeah.
So, how have you noticed the conversations going differently than if you didn't invite Kairos in?
Well, what I find for myself, and I'm trying to create an environment here. So, what it does for me is it allows me to, because when I was younger, I was a little bit all over the place emotionally, and it really does help me center myself to bring the self that I want to bring into the conversation with a lot of intention, to be more intentional about how I'm using that time and space, right? So whether it's my writing or whether it's a conversation. I want to show up for that time or for that person in the best way that I can, right? You always have a goal of what you're trying to accomplish in a conversation. You have something you want to say, or you have something that you want to hear, and what version of yourself is going to show up there. So you can kind of decide that. If you take a minute, just a beat to say, okay. I want to bring my most compassionate self, or I don't want to fly off the handle at my husband. I want to bring a calm self, or I want to remember the person that I was when I was in love with him, or I want to remember the person I was for my child when he stopped, when he was a sweet little baby and he wasn't so irritating, or whatever, like whatever it is. You can have a difficult conversation in this way. You can say something that is difficult, but it will be a lot more productive if you have a kind of peace and calmness at the heart of yourself. And by doing this, you are creating intentionality around the person that you bring into the space. And you will find that the person you're talking to will react differently based on that. So everything will go better. And I think this for me is the key to a happy 20-year marriage. We are very good as a couple at if there's a problem that needs to be solved, we solve it together by linking up and doing it together. We don't go at each other. My husband for 20 years at solving a problem, and they come up, right? Life is life, right? I mean, there's problems
Right.
with the kids, with the work, whatever. I mean, anything. How are we going to do it together? So that it's really, I've seen the benefit of it. I mean, this is how I end up in a happy place, even though all I saw was all these terrible divorces, right? I mean, these are the tools that, I mean, and we don't have all the time to explore everything that I've done over all these years, but this is one piece of it. It really can help you. So if you're finding that you're losing your temper or you're saying things that you don't mean, or you regret something that happened later, this is a tool that you can use to try to have more of the outcome that you're looking for. So here it is. Try
So
it, see
good.
if it helps. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I can't imagine it not helping,
Yeah.
because the energy that you bring too is a thing,
Right.
right? Like when you
Absolutely.
bring yourself into a conversation, if you're heated and you bring that heated energy,
Right.
then the person you're talking to can easily heat up.
Right.
Right?
Right.
But if you have a calm energy and a
Right.
truly loving energy, then it's hard for the other person to
Right.
be anything but
Well,
calm and loving.
it is interesting how, I mean, people will respond to the energy that you bring, right? As you've just said. And one thing that I learned a few years ago that I found really helpful is that anytime I meet a new person, and I just moved to a new state, I'm going to be meeting hopefully a lot of new friends soon as I get to know the community. And when I meet someone new, I always approach it as if I am going to meet the best version of them and that I'm going to show them the best version of me. And by merely going into any conversation I have with that expectation set, 99% of the time, that's what I see. I don't see the person that's angry or frustrated or, there's something wrong in their lives, which there's something wrong. So that's not the face they show me because I show them the best possible, I want them to have the best experience out of the conversation. So how can I do that? I can facilitate that by saying, here is the best version of Allison, and I'm going to show you that in our 5-minute conversation. So by walking into anything with that intention, much of the time they will mirror that back. But if you go in and you're angry, or if you want to lash out because you're angry, or if you're feeling any kind of negative thing, I mean, anger is a real thing and it shouldn't be stifled necessarily, but you can be angry about something without throwing it at the other person, right? Like there is a problem here that needs to be solved and I'm angry about it, but instead of like throwing it at them, they're just going to throw it back at you, right? So if you can try this, I mean, if this is something that you struggle with, really, I mean, see what it feels like to approach any difficult thing that you have to do with that intention in your mind. And it will shift things for you. It really will. So, yeah.
Oh my gosh, you've given so much good advice.
Oh,
I'm
thank
so
you.
excited for the listeners. I'm excited for myself. I learned so much today. And so thank you so much
You're
for
very welcome.
bringing all the wisdom. How can people get in touch with you, Allison?
Okay, so because you didn't say my last name at the beginning, I'm going to say it now. My name is Allison Stieger. Rhymes with eager. It's spelled Stieger, and my business is called Mythic Stories. And you can find me very easily on the internet. I am on all the social media, all the things. And on my website, mythicstories.com, we have classes coming out. I've got a book coming out. And you can, if you want to, if some of this intrigues you, I would invite all of your listeners to try this. You can go onto my website and sign up for a 30-minute conversation one-on-one with me. I really love doing these because I get to meet so many interesting people and it allows me to find new ways to solve problems. So just in 30 minutes, I will give you the best of what I've got. And often that leads to coaching situations. I have a very limited number of coaching slots available. So if that's something that interests you, we can explore that. So, there are a lot of ways to engage with this work. But, if you want to work with me professionally or you just want to hear what I have to say, those are some ways to do that. But, just go and read a myth and see through the filter of this conversation that you've just heard and see what starts to kind of foment for you and bubble up under the surface of that story and see what it might have to show you. So,
So good, so good, so good. And yes, and everything will be in the show notes. So you can get everything that you need to get a hold of Allison.
yes,
Allison, thank you so much for today. Thank you for
you're
being
very
here and
welcome.
taking your time and giving us all this gold, this great stuff that you gave us today. I so appreciate it.
No, you're very welcome. It was delightful to talk with you. It's just the most fun. Thank you.
So fun, so fun. And thank you, everybody, for being with us today. I hope you got as much out of it as I did. I know that you likely did. And so I just want to say that until we see each other again, I just pray that you keep your heart open and live your love loud.